I've never told anyone this. Not my dispatcher. Not my wife. Not the guy at the way station who looked at me funny when I pulled in at sunrise shaking so bad I could barely sign my name. Because if I tell people what happened on I-40 that night, they'll think I lost my mind out there in the dark. And maybe I did. But here's the thing, I still don't know if I ever found it again. That's the part that keeps me up. Not the mile marker. Not the figure on the shoulder. Not the sound from inside the trailer, that wet, deliberate sound like something rearranging itself in the dark. No. What keeps me staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. is one simple question I cannot answer. How long was I on that road? My logbook says 8 hours. My phone says 4. My body, the gray in my beard that wasn't there before, the way my knees ache now like an old man's, the look my daughter gave me the first time she saw me afterward, like she was doing the math and something didn't add up. My body says something else entirely. Let me start from the beginning. Because if you're going to understand what happened to me on that 11-mile stretch of Interstate 40 somewhere between Winslow and Flagstaff, Arizona, you need to understand who I was before it. A rational man. A practical man. 17 years behind the wheel, over 1 million miles logged. I've driven through blizzards in Wyoming. I've white-knuckled through fog so thick in Tennessee you could press your hand against it. I've seen things on the road that would make civilians go pale. Accidents, storms, the particular loneliness of 3 a.m. on a highway that stretches to the edge of the visible world. I was not the kind of man who scared easy. I am now. The job was a standard haul. I picked up the load in Albuquerque on a Tuesday afternoon. Sealed cargo, temperature controlled, bound for a distribution center outside Barstow, California. 43,000 pounds of commercial refrigeration units, or so the manifest said. I didn't ask questions. Drivers don't open sealed loads. You sign the paperwork, you check the seals, you drive. That's the job. That's always been the job. I hit the scale house clean, fueled up at a Flying J on the east side of Albuquerque, bought a large coffee and a bag of sunflower seeds, and merged onto I-40 West just after 9 p.m. The kind of start I'd had 1,000 times before. The rig was a 2019 Kenworth T680, not mine, a company truck. Comfortable enough. The seat fit right, the mirrors were clean, the CB worked. I had a playlist going on my phone, Merle Haggard bleeding into Waylon Jennings bleeding into Willie, and the desert night was coming down around the highway like a curtain being pulled slowly over a window. Stars punching through the dark above the mesa. The temperature outside reading 61 degrees. The kind of night where the road almost feels friendly. I was making good time. Passed through Gallup just before 10. The desert out there is something else at night. No suburbs bleeding light into the sky, no civilization chewing at the dark. Just the 2 tunnels your headlights cut into the black, and the road and whatever the road decides to show you. My CB was on channel 19, the standard trucker frequency, and it was alive with the usual chatter. A driver coming east out of Flagstaff was griping about construction delays on the 17. Somebody called Biscuit, I never got his real name, just the handle, was on about fuel prices out of Needles. A woman who ran produce out of Phoenix had a joke so bad I actually laughed out loud in the cab, the sound strange and too big in the space. I passed the New Mexico-Arizona border just before 11. The land out here gets stranger. The mesas give way to longer, flatter stretches, and the rock formations rise up on either side like the ruins of something enormous and ancient. I've driven this road in daylight. It's beautiful in a severe, indifferent way. At night it's something else. At night it feels like the landscape is holding its breath. I cracked the window a little. Desert air, cool and clean, carried the faint smell of sage and something mineral I never had a name for. The engine was running smooth. That deep, rhythmic diesel purr that gets into your bones after enough years becomes almost like breathing. I was eating sunflower seeds and watching the road unroll in front of me when the first thing happened. The thing I told myself in the moment meant nothing. My GPS blinked. Just once. Screen went dark, came back. Rerouted itself for half a second, then settled. The little blue arrow was still on I-40, pointed west, Barstow still out ahead like a promise. I glanced at it, looked back at the road. Software glitch, I thought. Happens. I remember thinking that very clearly. Because it's important. I remember the exact thought I used to dismiss the first warning. I crossed through Winslow at 11:47. I know the time because I noted it in my mental log. I always count towns on long hauls, mark them like buoys. Winslow to Flagstaff is about 60 miles on I-40. Easy stretch. Hour and 10 minutes depending on traffic and grade. I've done it enough times that it feels like muscle memory. I cleared the edge of town, the lights of the gas stations and the motel signs falling away behind me, and the highway opened up into that long dark throat of desert. The CB traffic had thinned out. Biscuit had signed off somewhere around exit 233. The produce woman had gone quiet. There was a driver somewhere out ahead of me. I'd been hearing his idle chatter about a Subway sandwich for the last 40 minutes, and then even he went to static. I turned the music up. For 20 minutes, everything was normal. The road was straight. The miles ticked by on the odometer. The desert sat dark and still on both sides, and the stars above were so dense and bright they almost looked fake, like something painted up there by someone who'd never actually seen the night sky and was working from a description. I was thinking about my daughter. She had a soccer game that weekend, her first of the season, when I saw the lights. Not headlights. Not the orange smear of an overpass. A cluster of red and white reflective markers on the highway shoulder, the kind that line construction zones. But there was no construction. No cones, no barriers, no crew vehicles parked in the breakdown lane. Just a stretch of those markers, maybe 30 yards of them, and then nothing. I slowed a little without thinking. Eased off the throttle. Passed through them and checked my mirrors. They were already gone in the dark behind me, just the red pinpricks of my taillights painting the road. Strange, but not alarming. Equipment gets left. Signs get forgotten. I made a mental note of it and drove on. That's when I passed the first mile marker. Mile markers on I-40 in Arizona run west from the New Mexico border. By the time you clear Winslow heading west, you're in the 250s, moving down toward the 200s as you approach Flagstaff. I knew approximately where I was. I had the GPS. I had 17 years of running this road in my memory. The marker I passed read 253. Normal. Expected. 2 minutes later, I passed 252. Counting down. Fine. Then 251. Then I drove for what felt like 5, maybe 6 minutes, longer than a mile should take at 62 miles per hour, and passed 251 again. I blinked. Looked in the mirror. Same green post, same white numbers disappearing into the dark. Misread it, I told myself. Night driving does that. Same number twice, you're tired, you miscounted. I focused on the road. Watched for the next one. It came up sooner than it should have. 251. I hit the brakes harder than I meant to. The trailer shuddered behind me, 43,000 pounds of momentum expressing its displeasure. I brought the rig down to 40, then 35, and I stared at that marker as I crept past it. Green post. White reflective numerals. 251. Clear as anything. I pulled over onto the shoulder and sat there with the engine idling and the hazard lights strobing yellow in the dark. I picked up my phone. No signal. I switched to the CB. Any driver westbound on 40 between Winslow and Flagstaff, got eyes on you. What's your 20? Static. Not the soft, inhabited static of a quiet channel, something thicker. Textured. Like static that had weight to it. I tried again. Nothing. I sat there for a moment, hazards blinking, engine idling, the desert dark and absolutely silent outside the glass. Then I put it in gear and drove on. The next mile marker was 250. Then 249. My breathing slowed back toward normal. I let the speed creep back up. I told myself, and I want you to hear how hard I was working to be rational, I told myself that the road out here sometimes runs near itself, that there are sections where two parallel stretches of highway sit close enough together that a driver might see a marker from the opposite lane and misread it as his own. I told myself that for about 8 minutes. Then I passed the construction markers again. The same cluster. Same 30-yard stretch of red and white reflectors on the shoulder. No barriers, no crew, no equipment. I know they were the same ones because one of them was bent at the base, leaning out over the asphalt at maybe a 40-degree angle, and I'd noticed that the first time. The bent one. I'd looked at it and thought, someone's going to lose that in the wind eventually. I stopped the truck. I sat in the cab and looked at those markers in my headlights and I did the math. If those markers were behind me, and I'd passed them heading west so they should have been behind me, then I had somehow traveled in a circle without turning the wheel. On a straight highway. In the middle of the Arizona desert. Which was impossible. So I opened the door and stepped down onto the shoulder. The cold hit me, sharper than I'd expected, desert cold that had teeth in it. The stars overhead were enormous and still, and the highway stretched in both directions into darkness so complete it looked solid. I walked to the nearest marker and touched it. Reflective plastic, cold, real. I looked east. I looked west. Nothing. No other vehicles. No lights. Not a single set of headlights in either direction, which on I-40 at midnight is not normal. That road never fully empties. There's always someone. I got back in the truck. My GPS was showing me in the correct location. Somewhere around mile marker 250 between Winslow and Flagstaff. The blue arrow was pointed west. Barstow was still ahead. The screen looked perfectly normal. But the satellite signal indicator, that little bar in the corner, was showing 0 bars. The GPS was navigating on cached map data. It had no idea where I actually was. I pressed east on the touchscreen, trying to scroll the map back behind me to see the road I'd already driven. The map shifted. And there, between Winslow and the point the GPS thought I was at, was a stretch of I-40 that the software had labeled, in small gray text, the kind that appears for minor annotations, with 2 words: restricted access. No explanation. No closure notice. Just those 2 words on a public interstate. I stared at that screen for a long time. Then I heard the sound from the trailer. It was subtle at first. That's the part that made it worse. If it had been a crash, a bang, something sudden, I could have filed it under shifting cargo and driven on. 43,000 pounds of refrigeration units settle and shift. Metal creaks. That's physics. But this wasn't a crash. It was a rhythm. Slow. Deliberate. Like something moving carefully in the dark, setting its weight down thoughtfully, trying not to be heard, but too large, ultimately, to be quiet. A deep, heavy pause thud that I felt in the seat back as much as heard it. Transmitted up through the 5th wheel, through the cab, into my spine. I sat absolutely still. It's the units shifting, I told myself. Temperature changes make metal move. You know this. The rhythm stopped. I waited 30 seconds. A minute. Then it started again, and this time it was closer to the front of the trailer. I have driven sealed loads for 11 of my 17 years. I know every sound a trailer makes. Road noise, brake hiss, glad hand rattle, the particular complaint of an air suspension hitting a seam wrong. I have a catalog of trailer sounds in my memory built up from hundreds of thousands of miles. What I heard moving in that trailer was not any of them. I put the truck in gear and drove. I want to tell you exactly what the sky looked like at that point because people ask me about it and I have a hard time explaining it without sounding unhinged. The stars were still there. The road was still lit correctly by my headlights. Everything visual looked fine. But the quality of the darkness had changed. I'm a man who spends a lot of time in the dark, and I'm telling you, the dark out there had gotten wrong. It was too uniform. It absorbed the light at the edges of my beams in a way that felt active, like it was pulling at the light rather than just sitting in its absence. The air through the cracked window smelled different too. Still desert, still cold. But underneath it, something else. Something I associated, and I know how this sounds, with basements. With places that don't get opened often. A deep, still, enclosed smell that had no business being in the open air of the Arizona high desert. I pushed the speed up to 65, then 70. The trailer made the sound again. I turned the music up until the cab vibrated with it and I couldn't hear anything else, and I drove. Mile markers, 248, 247, 246. Good. Counting down, moving west, working toward Flagstaff. I was okay. I was making progress. 20 more miles, maybe 30, and I'd hit the glow of the city on the horizon, and I'd pull off at the first truck stop and sit in the lot and drink bad coffee until my hands stopped shaking. 245, 244, 243. The longest stretch between markers I've ever experienced. That one went on for what my dashboard clock said was 11 minutes. 11 minutes between mile markers on a straight, flat highway where I was running 68 miles per hour. I should have covered almost 13 miles in that time. Mile 243 should have been followed almost immediately by 242. Instead, after 11 minutes, I passed 243 again. I hit the steering wheel with my palm. Once hard enough to hurt. The horn blared in the dark. A brief, loud human sound that got swallowed immediately by the silence outside. I pulled to the shoulder and stopped. "Come on," I said out loud. "Come on." My voice sounded wrong. Thin. Like talking in a room with too many soft surfaces. I rolled down the window fully and leaned out and looked back at the marker. 243. Definite. Unambiguous. And that's when I saw the figure. It was standing at the far edge of my taillight's reach, maybe 300 feet back down the highway shoulder, right at the point where red light gives up and dark takes over. The shape of a person. Standing still. Facing the truck. I told myself it was a stranded motorist. Because that's what rational people do. They apply the simplest explanation. Someone broke down. Someone wandered out here on foot. Rare, but it happens. I've passed stranded motorists at night, stopped for a few, called it in for others. But stranded motorists wave. They move toward you when your taillights hit them because taillights mean vehicle, vehicle means help. This figure was not moving, was not waving, was just standing at the precise boundary of the light, as if it was aware of where the light ended. I watched it for what felt like a long time. Nothing. No movement. I slowly eased the truck forward, pulling back onto the highway. Watched my mirrors. The figure did not move as I drove away. Just stood there, getting smaller in the red wash of my lights, until the dark took it. I drove. 3 minutes later, my headlights found it again. Standing on the shoulder. Ahead of me. On the right side, same position, at the edge of where the light reaches, just barely visible. Same posture. Same absolute stillness. I had not passed it. It had not run ahead of me. I had been driving 65 miles per hour and it was simply there, in front of me, where it had not been 3 seconds before. I locked the doors. I grabbed the CB handset and held the button down. Mayday. This is a westbound driver on I-40 between Winslow and Flagstaff. I am having I need a copy. Anyone on channel 19, I need a copy right now. Static. That heavy, textured static. I switched to channel 9, the emergency channel. Every CB radio in a truck is legally supposed to monitor channel 9. There are always people on channel 9. Mayday, mayday, I-40 westbound, driver in distress. Anyone copy? For a moment, nothing. Then a voice. I want to be careful here because I've thought about this a lot, and I'm not sure the word voice is quite right. It was in the frequency range of a human voice. It used the cadence of speech. But it was like a recording of speech played back through something that didn't fully understand what speech was supposed to sound like. The pauses were in the wrong places and the syllables had the wrong weight. Said my name. Not my handle. Not a general response. My name, my actual first name, which was not on the truck, was not on the CB, was not anything a stranger scanning emergency channels would have any reason to know. I set the handset down very carefully, like it was something that might break or bite. The voice kept talking. I couldn't make out words after the name. It became that textured static again, cycling up and down in pitch. But underneath it, faint and rhythmic, I heard something else. Breathing. Slow. Patient. Close. I turned off the CB. The truck filled with silence and engine noise and the low hum of the road, and I sat in it and drove and tried not to look at the figure the next time my headlights found it, standing at the edge of the light up ahead, waiting. I tried my phone. No signal, but I opened the keypad and dialed 911 anyway, held it to my ear. Sometimes calls go through even with no bars. The phone will reach for any available tower and connect a 911 call. A ring. Then a voice. 911, what's your emergency? Yes, I'm a truck driver on I-40 westbound between Winslow and Flagstaff, Arizona. I think I'm in some kind of trouble. I need someone to... I'm sorry, can you repeat your location? I-40, Arizona. Between Winslow and Flagstaff. Pause. Long enough that I pulled the phone from my ear to see if the call had dropped. It hadn't. Sir, I'm not finding that location in our system. It's a U.S. interstate. I-40. In Arizona. Another pause. When the voice came back, it was different. Not the cadence this time, not the wrongness I'd heard on the CB. This was more subtle. The tone. The quality. Can you describe where you are? I just told you. I-40 westbound. What is happening? Can you describe what you see around you? I opened my mouth to answer and then closed it. Because a 911 dispatcher doesn't ask that question. They ask for your location, your emergency, if you need fire, police, or ambulance. They do not ask what you see around you. Who is this? I said. The call dropped. Here is where I have to ask you to stay with me because I know how this sounds, and I know it crosses a line from strange experience on the road into something that makes people uncomfortable in a different way. But I am telling you exactly what happened, in the order it happened, with nothing added and nothing removed. I drove for what my dashboard clock said was 45 minutes. My odometer said I covered 61 miles. By any rational accounting, I should have been in Flagstaff or through it by the time those numbers rolled over. I was not. The highway was unchanged. The same flat dark, the same mesas, the same stars that I was starting to notice never seemed to move no matter how long I drove beneath them. Stars move across the sky. Rotation, the Earth's movement, predictable and constant. These stars were fixed. Like a backdrop. Like a photograph of a sky rather than an actual sky. The figure appeared 9 more times. I counted. Each time in the headlights ahead of me, still at the edge of the light. I stopped looking directly at it. I kept my eyes on the center line. Yellow dashes pulling me forward like stitches. The trailer sounds had developed. They were no longer just movement. There was a quality to them now that I can only describe as intentional. Not the random settling of cargo. It came and went in patterns. 3 slow movements, a pause, then 1 quick one. Then a long silence. Then again. 3 and 1, 3 and 1. Like a code. Like someone working something out. I turned the music up until the speakers distorted. I opened the sunflower seeds, but my hands were shaking and I spilled them across the seat, and the smell of the salt and the crunch of them underfoot was so aggressively normal that I nearly laughed. I just sat in the scattered sunflower seeds and drove. The GPS screen had gone dark 20 minutes earlier and not come back. The radio, the AM/FM radio, the regular one, nothing to do with CB, had been silent since I'd last tried it. But now, without my touching it, it turned on. Volume low. A voice, clearly, confidently, speaking words I couldn't quite make out, in a tone that reminded me of late-night radio preachers. The cadence of long, serious sentences, pauses for emphasis, the suggestion of enormous importance. I reached for the power button and the voice said, clearly and unmistakably, in perfectly normal human cadence, "Don't stop." I took my hand off the button. The preacher voice resumed. I drove. And then my headlights found the mile marker. I would have thought it was a hallucination, which I was genuinely, seriously considering as an explanation for all of it, except for the way it looked. Hallucinations, the way I understand them, take on a quality of the unreal. They're too vivid or too fluid, or they behave in ways that nothing solid behaves. The marker looked absolutely real. Same green post as every other marker. Same weathered coating, same slightly sun-faded quality even in the dark. The numbers were reflective white, catching my headlights perfectly, the way all of them do. 666. I drove past it slowly. Reached out and touched the window glass as if that would tell me something. I watched it in my mirrors until it disappeared in the dark behind me. On I-40 in Arizona, westbound, the mile markers count down from 359 at the New Mexico border towards 0 near the California line. They are sequential. There are no gaps, no duplicates, and certainly no mile markers above 359 on the western stretch. There is no mile marker 666. There is no mile marker 666 on any highway in Arizona. I know this because I spent 3 weeks after that night combing through every ADOT record I could access, and then I hired someone, a transportation researcher, I don't want to say more than that, to verify it. Mile marker 666 does not exist. I passed it on a Tuesday night in October, and I want to tell you what happened immediately after, because this is where my memory gets strange. Not in the way where I think I was unconscious, but in the way where time seemed to do something it's not supposed to do. The mile marker disappeared behind me, and then I was somewhere else. Same road, same truck, same desert, but the road was narrower. Not dramatically. You might not have noticed if you hadn't been driving it for an hour, hadn't memorized the exact width of the lanes, the precise distance from the white fog line to the shoulder edge. It was narrower by maybe 2 feet. Enough that my right mirror was suddenly, terrifyingly close to the guardrail post. Except there had been no guardrails before. They were here now. Old ones, older than the highway should have supported, painted silver and pocked with rust, stretched along both shoulders, hemming me in. And the sky was different. I don't have good language for this. I've tried to explain it to people and they look at me like I've described a fever dream, and maybe that's what it was, but I'm going to try once more. The stars were gone. Not clouded over, there were no clouds. The sky was simply dark in a way that has no natural analog. No moon. No stars. No gradation of darkness. No horizon glow. Nothing. Like someone had taken everything above the road and replaced it with a single flat color that was the idea of darkness rather than actual darkness. My headlights still worked. They lit the road in front of me normally. But outside the 2 cones of light, the dark was absolute in a way that made the beams look fragile. Like they were being allowed to exist rather than pushing back the night on their own power. The temperature gauge inside the cab read normal. The gauges all read normal. Engine temperature, oil pressure, fuel level, fine. The fuel level. I noted it because it hadn't moved in an hour, despite the fact that a loaded Kenworth at highway speed burns roughly 6 gallons an hour. I had the same 3/4 tank I'd started with in Albuquerque. The trailer sounds had stopped. That was somehow worse. For the previous hour, as disturbing as the sounds were, they were at least something I could locate, account for, build mental walls around. The silence from the trailer now had a quality of attention to it. Like whatever had been moving had stopped because it had found what it was looking for and didn't need to move anymore. I tried not to think about what was on the other side of the cab's rear wall. About the fact that whatever was in that trailer, I was connected to it, literally, mechanically, through steel and bolts in the 5th wheel, and moving with it, and had been for hours. The figure appeared again. Directly in front of me, in the center of the road. Not on the shoulder. The center. Standing in my lane, facing me. I stood on the brakes. The truck screamed, all that mass and momentum translated into sound and heat and the stench of burning rubber. The trailer pushed forward, a 43,000-pound argument for why you should never brake hard in a loaded semi. I fought the wheel, kept it straight through will and muscle memory, and the truck stopped. Stopped with my headlights pointed directly at the figure, maybe 50 feet away. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. I want to be honest with you. When I try to describe what I saw, the description doesn't match the fear. That's the most unsettling part. Because what I saw should not have been the most frightening thing I'd ever looked at. It was a person. The shape of a person. Standing in the road. But there was something wrong with the proportions. Not dramatically, not like a monster, not like something from a movie. Just subtle enough that your brain can't settle on it, keeps trying to recalibrate and failing. The arms were too still. People who stand still move. They breathe, they shift weight, they blink, they do 100 small involuntary things that announce life. This thing did none of them. And the face. It had a face. I could see that much. But I cannot tell you what the face looked like. I stared at it for what might have been 2 minutes, in direct headlights from 50 feet away, and I cannot reconstruct the face. Every time I try, my memory presents me with a blank. Not darkness, not blur, just blank. Like a face-shaped piece of information that my mind simply will not hold. It turned and walked off the road. Into the dark. The dark swallowed it immediately. I sat there in the road for a long moment. Then, slowly I put the truck back in gear. I drove around the spot where it had been standing. I don't know why. It seemed important not to drive through that spot. I found the first of them about 20 minutes later. A truck. A white Freightliner, older model, looked like a mid-2000s Columbia, parked on the shoulder with its hazard lights on. Or they had been on at some point. They were still blinking but feebly, the battery nearly dead. Slow, stuttering orange flashes in the dark. I pulled up behind it and stopped. Studied it in my headlights. The cab was dark. I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. Every instinct I had told me not to get out of my truck. I picked up the CB. Driver in the white Freightliner, westbound 40, can you hear me? What's your status? Nothing. Not static. Silence, the kind that lands on the right frequency to tell you the receiver is on but no one is there to answer. I watched the shape in the cab for a long time. It wasn't moving. It was in the driver's seat, slumped slightly, facing forward. Just sitting there. Not unconscious. The posture was wrong for unconscious. Something more like focused. The way you look when you're staring at something that isn't there. I drove on. Half a mile later, another truck. This one a Peterbilt, blue, pulled nose into the guardrail. Engine off. Empty cab as far as I could see. Then another. A flatbed, cargo still on it, lumber strapped and tarped, all of it in order, as if the driver had stopped mid-run and simply stepped away. The door was hanging open. I drove past all of them. I'm not proud of that. I want to say I stopped, tried harder, got out and knocked on windows. But I didn't. I drove because the part of my brain that was still functional was telling me that the only thing I could do for myself or anyone else in that place was find the way out. There was a way out. By this point, I had given up trying to calculate how long I'd been driving. The dashboard clock had frozen at 2:14 and stayed there for what felt like at least an hour. My phone was dead, not low battery, not no signal. Just dead. Black screen, no response to the power button. I kept driving. And then, somewhere in that endless dark stretch, I started to remember something. A conversation. 3 or 4 months earlier at a truck stop in Kingman, Arizona, over bad coffee with a driver named either Gerald or Garrett. The name slips now, blurs with everything else from that night. We'd been talking the way drivers talk, trading road stories, and he told me about a stretch of 40 between Winslow and Flagstaff where trucks went missing. Not accidents, he'd said. Not rollovers, not jackknives. Just missing. Driver's log shows them on the road and then it stops. I'd laughed. Logs glitch. The load showed up, he said. The trailers. They found 2 of them just sitting on the shoulder out there, no damage, seals intact, reefers still running. No trucks. Just the trailers sitting there. Like someone unhitched them. I hadn't thought about that conversation once in 4 months. I was thinking about it now. Here's what I believe happened, and I know how this sounds, and I'm telling you anyway. I believe that stretch of I-40, 11 miles of it, maybe or maybe more, maybe it varies, is not entirely in the same place as the rest of the road. I don't have a framework for that feels satisfying. I've read things since that night, looked into accounts of other drivers, looked into the disappearances Gerald or Garrett had mentioned, and I found records of 6 trucks that went missing on that corridor over 14 years. 6 drivers never found. Loads recovered, as he'd said, or sometimes not recovered at all. Investigation reports that use the phrase unknown circumstances the way you use it when unknown is the honest answer and not a placeholder. I believe what I drove through that night was something like a loop, a section of road that had become, for some reason I can't explain and won't try to, detached from the linear progress of ordinary highway. You drive in and you keep driving and the exit never comes. I believe the figure I saw was not a person in the way I understand people. I believe it's been there longer than the highway. I believe the highway runs through its territory, and sometimes it decides to keep what comes through. I believe the sounds I heard from the trailer were something that came on with the load in Albuquerque, or maybe something that joined the load later, somewhere on that dark 11-mile stretch. And I believe it was paying attention to me with the same patience and totality that a cat pays attention to a mouse hole. And I believe, this is the part one can barely say out loud, that the truckers in those parked vehicles I passed were not unconscious. We're not dead. We're not sleeping. We're still there. In the way I was still there. In the loop. Driving forever in their heads while their bodies sat behind the wheel and the batteries slowly died. I'm going to tell you how I got out. Or what I believe got me out, because I'm not certain of much from those final 20 or 30 or however many minutes. I stopped listening. To all of it. To the radio voices and the CB and the sounds from the trailer and the part of my brain that wanted to catastrophize and the part that wanted to rationalize. I turned off everything I could turn off and I drove and I looked only at the road directly in front of me and I said out loud, to the cab, to the dark, to whatever was in the trailer, to the thing that kept appearing at the edge of my lights. I said, I've got a daughter who has a soccer game on Saturday. I said it again. And again. Just that one sentence over and over, the most ordinary and specific and real thing I could put into words. My daughter. The soccer game. Saturday. Concrete nouns. Real time. A future that existed in the actual world. I'm not saying it worked because of anything mystical or because of the content. I think it worked, if it worked, because it kept me from dissociating, from sliding into the state those other drivers had slid into. The state of just driving forever, unmoored from everything that made you who you were. It gave me something to drive toward. The lights of Flagstaff appeared on the horizon. I don't know when they appeared. I was staring at the road and saying the sentence, and then I looked up and there were lights on the horizon and they were real lights, the warm sodium orange sprawl of a city, light that bled up into an actual sky with actual stars that moved infinitesimally the way stars are supposed to. I accelerated. The guardrails were gone. The road had widened back to normal. The fuel gauge, which had been frozen for hours, dropped by a quarter tank in the space of about 30 seconds, as if catching up to where it was supposed to be. I passed a mile marker. 196. Normal. Expected. The CB crackled. A voice, a real one with all the right human imperfections. Any westbound driver, got a bear in the median around exit 185, heads up. I grabbed the handset. Copy that, driver. What's your 20? Just past Flag heading toward Williams. You out there, buddy? Yeah, I said. I'm here. The sound from the trailer had stopped. Everything had stopped. The cab felt like a cab again, familiar, close mine. I could smell the sunflower seeds I'd spilled. I could feel the texture of the steering wheel under my palms. I drove into Flagstaff and pulled into the first truck stop I found, a Love's on the north side of the highway, and I parked and turned off the engine and sat there for a while in the silence and the orange parking lot light. Then I got out and walked to the trailer. The seals were intact. Both of them, the rear doors and the side hatch. Untouched. Official and order. But the temperature indicator on the reefer unit was reading 8 degrees higher than it should have been. Nothing alarming on its own. But the unit was running, had been running the whole time, pulling power. It should have been holding temperature. Something had added heat. I didn't open the doors. I want to be clear about that. I did not open the doors. I walked back to the cab and called my dispatcher and told him I needed to be taken off the load, that I had a personal emergency, and I gave him the address of the truck stop and I sat in the lot and drank 3 cups of coffee and watched the sun come up over the Coconino Plateau. The load was picked up by another driver 6 hours later. I called out of work for 2 weeks. Told my wife I had a stomach bug. I drove again. Of course I did. You can't unknow how to drive a truck, can't unneed the paycheck, can't let one night, however inexplicable, rewrite the whole architecture of your life. I went back to work and I drove and I took routes that kept me away from I 40 in Arizona, and for a while that was enough. But I looked into it. Quietly, carefully, in the way a person looks into something they know will only make them worse. 3 of the 6 missing drivers from that corridor were running sealed loads. Temperature controlled. All 3 had the same originating shipper out of Albuquerque. I'm not going to name the company. I'm not going to say what I think that means because I genuinely don't know what I think it means. I found one account online, buried in an old trucking forum, from a driver who described passing a mile marker he called The one that doesn't match, somewhere on 40 in Arizona. He described a figure on the shoulder. He described the sounds. He posted 3 times on that forum over the course of what seemed to be a few days, and then his account went inactive. His last post said, "I think I'm still there. I think the rest of this is just what it shows you while it keeps you." I think about that sentence more than I should. Here's the last thing I'll tell you. Last October, a year almost exactly after that night, my daughter's birthday. We're at dinner, nice place, candles on the table. My wife is laughing at something my daughter said. Everything is exactly right. My phone buzzes. Unknown number. I don't know why I answered it. I don't answer unknown numbers. But I did. Static. Heavy, textured, with weight to it. And underneath it, faint and rhythmic and patient. Breathing. I hung up. Turned the phone off. Sat at the table with my family and watched the candles and waited for my hands to stop shaking. They did, eventually. But here's what I didn't tell my wife, what I haven't told anyone, what I'm telling you now because I don't know who else to tell and because saying it out loud is the only thing that still makes me feel like I'm actually here and not somewhere else entirely. The call lasted 4 seconds. My phone was off. My phone has been off for an entire year. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means I made it out completely or if what made it out was all of me or if some part, some thread, is still there on that road, in that dark, passing mile marker 251 for the 10,000th time, listening to something move in the trailer, waiting for a city that never appears on the horizon. Still driving. Mile after mile after mile. Going nowhere. If you're a driver. If you run I-40 through Arizona. If you're westbound, somewhere between Winslow and Flagstaff, and your GPS goes dark and the mile markers stop making sense. Don't slow down. Don't look at the shoulder. Don't answer the radio. And whatever you hear from behind you, whatever it sounds like it's doing back there in the dark, don't open the trailer doors. Just drive. Say something real. Something with a name in it. Something that puts you in a time and place that still exists. And pray the road lets you back. I heard my own voice on the CB radio, the night I was supposed to be dead. That transmission didn't come from any living person. It came from the future. Or maybe, and this is the part that still makes my hands shake when I grip a steering wheel, it came from the past. The voice started as static. Just a bad signal on channel 19, the kind every trucker has tuned out 1,000 times between here and nowhere. But static doesn't describe locations. Static doesn't give you names. And static sure as hell doesn't whisper your own words back at you before you've even said them. What I'm about to tell you happened over a period of 11 days on a stretch of I-40 between Albuquerque and Amarillo. 11 days that I can account for. What I cannot account for, what no one can, is how many times it happened before I was aware of it. How many times it had already happened. And whether it's still happening right now, somewhere out there in the dark between mile markers, looping on a frequency no one's supposed to be able to reach. My name is Dale Mercer. I've been a long-haul driver for 19 years. And I need somebody to believe me. The thing about trucking is that it's 90% silence and 10% noise, and the noise part isn't conversation. It's just proof that other people are out there in the dark with you. CB radio has been the heartbeat of this industry since before I was born. Channel 19 is the main drag, the interstate frequency. You pick up chatter about Smokies, that's law enforcement, road hazards, construction delays, way stations. At night, when the AM signals bend off the atmosphere, you sometimes get transmissions from hundreds of miles away. Ghost signals, some guys call them. Old-timers say they once picked up a trucker broadcasting from the other side of the Rockies clear as a bell at 2 a.m. I had a Cobra 29 LX Max mounted just below my dash. Good unit. I'd had it for 6 years and it never gave me a lick of trouble. I drove a Peterbilt 389, pulling refrigerated freight, produced mostly, sometimes pharmaceuticals, for a regional outfit out of Albuquerque called Sandia Logistics. My regular run was ABQ to Amarillo and back, 286 miles each way. I knew every rest stop, every dip in the pavement, every overpass that hummed different in a crosswind. I knew the sound of that highway the way you know the sound of your own breathing. The first transmission happened on a Tuesday night. October. The kind of October night in the New Mexico high desert that reminds you the earth is very old and very indifferent. I'd left Albuquerque at 10 p.m., running light, empty trailer, heading east to pick up a load in Amarillo. The sky was clear. Not a cloud anywhere. Just stars so thick they looked fake, and the 2 bright tunnels of my headlights cutting into nothing. I was somewhere around mile marker 117, between Moriarty and Klein's Corners, when I heard it. I want to be precise about the timeline. I've replayed it in my head thousands of times. 10:47 p.m. The CB crackled. Normal. Static always picks up around that stretch because of the terrain. There's a long ridge to the north that does something weird to signals. I'd learned to tune it out. But then a voice came through. Not a trucker's voice. Not the flat, practiced drawl of someone who's been talking into a microphone for years. This voice was wrong somehow. It had a cadence that didn't feel natural, like someone reading from a script they'd never read before. The words came out at the wrong pace. Too even. Pauses in the wrong places. It said, accident. Westbound. Mile marker 89. 2 vehicles. 1 fatality. Road will be closed. And then the static swallowed it. I sat with that for a second. Mile marker 89 on I-40 westbound was about 28 miles behind me. I'd passed it at maybe 10:35. There'd been nothing there. No flares, no lights, no smokies. I would have seen something. I keyed up. Any driver got eyes on an accident near mile marker 89 westbound? Brake. Nothing. A few seconds of open air, then someone, a woman from the sounds of it running a flatbed, came back with, negative on 89 good buddy. I came through there maybe 10 minutes ago. All clear. I thanked her. Let it go. I was in Amarillo by 3 a.m. I grabbed 4 hours of sleep at a TA travel center on I-40 East and woke up to my phone buzzing. It was a text from my dispatcher, Elena. Just a heads up. There'd been a 2-car accident on I-40 westbound near mile marker 89. Happened around midnight. 1 fatality, a man in a Dodge pickup who'd crossed the center line. The road had been closed for 2 hours. I read that text 3 times. I told myself, coincidence. That stretch of highway sees its share of accidents. Lots of crosswind. Drunk drivers. Animals in the road. I told myself that right up until I heard the voice again. 3 days later. Friday night, same run, same direction. I'd left Albuquerque at 11 p.m. this time, running a full load, refrigerated produce, head lettuce and Roma tomatoes, bound for a distribution center outside Amarillo. I was past the Tijeras Canyon stretch, moving through the long flat plateau east of the mountains, when the CB crackled again. Same quality to the transmission. That wrong cadence, that too even rhythm. Overturned semi. Eastbound. Mile marker 204. Driver ejected. Not survivable. Approaching drivers will stop. Static. Mile marker 204 eastbound. That was about 80 miles ahead of me. My mouth went dry. I keyed up, asked if anyone had traffic on mile marker 204. No response. I tried again. Nothing. I kept driving. What else do you do? I found it at 1:17 a.m. A Kenworth T680 on its side in the median, refrigerated trailer jackknifed behind it. The scene was fresh. No emergency vehicles yet, just 2 passenger cars stopped in the breakdown lane with their hazards going, drivers standing outside with their hands over their mouths. The kind of stillness that means someone is already past help. I pulled over. Called 911. Got out of my cab. The driver had gone through the windshield. I don't need to describe it more than that. I sat in my cab for 45 minutes waiting for the state police to arrive and take my statement. The whole time the CB sat quiet. Nothing on Channel 19 except the normal chatter of drivers rerouting around the closure. I told the trooper I'd heard a transmission about the accident. He asked if I could describe the voice. I tried. He wrote something down, nodded, thanked me for stopping. I don't think he wrote what I said. On the way back to Albuquerque 2 days later, I called my brother-in-law, Marcus, who does something with radio engineering for a company in Phoenix. I described the transmissions to him. He was quiet for a moment, then said there are atmospheric conditions. Ducting, he called it, that can sometimes carry signals extraordinary distances. A transmission made hours earlier in another location could, under specific conditions, be received somewhere else with a time delay. How big a time delay? I asked. Seconds. Maybe a minute or 2 in extreme cases. Not hours. Not the gap between a prediction and an event. I thanked him and didn't call him again about it. The 3rd transmission happened 6 days after the 2nd. Wednesday. I'd been on edge the entire week. Checking the CB constantly, jumping at static, watching the road ahead like I could see around corners if I just looked hard enough. My wife, Connie, asked me what was wrong. I told her nothing. Road fatigue. She looked at me the way she does when she knows I'm lying but has decided not to push. 19 years of marriage teaches you both of those skills. I almost didn't take the Wednesday run. I told myself that was irrational. 2 coincidences don't make a pattern. I'm a trucker, not a psychic. The road is the road. I took the run. 11:30 p.m. I was 40 miles east of Albuquerque when the CB came alive. This time the voice was clearer. Not distorted the way it had been. Cleaner. Like the signal was improving. That detail scares me more than anything else I'm about to tell you. Pedestrian fatality. Eastbound. Mile marker 141. Adult male. He is crossing from the south shoulder. He has been walking for 2 hours. His name is Raymond Castillo. He is trying to reach his daughter's house in Santa Rosa. He will not reach it. I stopped breathing. A name. He gave me a name. I grabbed the mic. Anyone on 19? I've got a possible pedestrian in the roadway near mile marker 141 eastbound. All drivers slow down, watch your lane. Brake, brake. 3 or 4 drivers acknowledged. One, Handle Desert Dog, said he'd just come through 141 about 10 minutes ago and didn't see anyone. I pushed east. I set my cruise control down from 72 to 60. Turned my CB volume all the way up. Turned my running lights to their brightest setting. At mile marker 143, I saw him. An older man, heavy set, wearing a light jacket that was too thin for the October night. Walking on the shoulder, eastbound, just beyond the reach of the reflector poles. If I'd been doing 72 if I hadn't been watching, the geometry of it made my stomach turn. I pulled onto the shoulder, put my four-ways on, and climbed down from the cab. Sir, are you okay? This road isn't safe at night. He turned around. He was maybe 65, gray-haired, wearing work boots that looked like they'd been on his feet for days. His eyes were glassy from cold and exhaustion. I'm going to my daughter's house, he said. In Santa Rosa. She's expecting me. I asked him his name. Raymond, he said. Raymond Castillo. I sat him in my cab with the heater going and called 911. The Guadalupe County Sheriff's Department came and took him. The deputy told me Raymond had walked from a truck stop in Moriarty, about 42 miles west. He'd been walking since early evening. Raymond Castillo was alive because I'd slowed down. Because I'd been watching. Because a voice on my CB radio had told me his name and what was about to happen to him, and for the first time, I'd been able to do something about it. I should have felt relieved. Instead, sitting in the breakdown lane watching the deputy's tail lights disappear into the dark, I felt the bottom drop out of something inside me. Because if the voice could be wrong, if Raymond Castillo was alive when the voice said he would die, then maybe the voice wasn't predicting. Maybe it was describing. And if it was describing, then the question wasn't what would happen. The question was, what already had. I spent 4 days trying to research it. I've got a laptop, I've got Wi-Fi at the truck stops, I've got time during mandatory rest breaks. I searched for theories about CB radio anomalies. I searched for stories of truckers hearing transmissions that didn't match any known broadcast. I found a lot of folklore, a lot of forum posts that trailed off into nonsense. I found one academic paper about radio wave propagation that made my head hurt. I found nothing that explained what was happening to me. So I tried a different angle. I started keeping notes. Exact time of each transmission. The mile marker I was at when I received it. The location described. The time the event actually occurred, based on the news, police reports I could find online, or my own first-hand account. What I found made the hair stand up on my arms and hasn't really gone back down since. Every event described in the transmissions was occurring at roughly the same time as the transmission itself. Not before. Not after. Simultaneously. The accident at mile marker 89 on that first Tuesday night. The transmission came at 10:47 p.m. The accident report logged the crash at approximately 10:50 p.m. 3 minutes. The difference between a signal leaving a source and arriving at a receiver. The overturned semi. The transmission came at 1:09 a.m. The first 911 call from those other drivers was logged at 1:11 a.m. Raymond Castillo. The transmission came at 11:52 p.m. If I worked backward from where I found him and the walking speed of an exhausted 65-year-old man, he would have entered the live lane of eastbound I-40 at approximately 11:54 p.m. The voice wasn't telling me what would happen. The voice was describing what was happening right now in real time at a location I hadn't reached yet, which meant it wasn't coming from the future. It was coming from somewhere else on the road, somewhere ahead of me, and it was moving in the same direction I was. Or it was coming from someone who was already there. I didn't sleep well that week. On the 9th day, a Monday, I called Connie and told her I was thinking about taking some time off. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come home, Dale. Come home and we'll figure it out." I told her I had one more run. Wednesday night. I shouldn't have taken it. Looking back, I know why I did. I needed to understand. I needed one more data point. I had this fixed idea that if I could record the transmission, If I could play it back, analyze it, prove it was real, then I could hand it to someone and say, here. Here is the thing that has been living in my CB radio. Here is the proof. I bought a digital recorder at a Walmart in Amarillo, stuck it to the dash with a rubber suction cup, set it to voice activation, tested it with my own voice and confirmed it worked. I was ready. I left Albuquerque at 10:15 p.m. on that Wednesday. Full load, same run. The night was overcast, no stars, a low ceiling of clouds that turned the sky above Albuquerque orange and then just went dark over the desert. No moon. The recorder was running. For the first hour, nothing. Just the normal chatter on 19. A few drivers talking about construction near the Texas state line. Someone reporting a blown tire on the shoulder near Klein's Corners. Regular traffic. Human voices with human rhythms. I passed mile marker 117, where the first transmission had come through, at 11:21 p.m. Nothing. I started to wonder if it was done. If whatever atmospheric quirk or equipment malfunction had created the transmissions had corrected itself. I started to feel something like disappointment mixed with relief, which is a strange cocktail. At 11:44 p.m., just past mile marker 156, the CB clicked. Then the voice, clearer than it had ever been. No distortion at all. Just a voice, steady and even, reading from a list I hadn't made yet. Head-on collision. Westbound. Mile marker 201. 2 trucks. Multiple fatalities. Cause, driver fatigue. Both drivers have been on the road for 14 hours. The first truck is a white Peterbilt pulling a refrigerated trailer. The driver's name is Dale Mercer. He fell asleep at the wheel at 12:31 a.m. His last thought was about his wife. Static. I jerked the wheel. The trailer swayed. I hit the brakes, not hard, controlled, and wrestled the rig back into my lane. My heart was a fist hitting a wall. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely key the mic. Brake. Any driver, this is Midnight Runner eastbound on I-40, I need a welfare check. Is anyone near mile marker 201? I have a report of a possible hazard. A voice came back immediately. Handle, long step. A man older, slow drawl. Midnight Runner, I'm just coming up on 201 westbound. What's your hazard? Do you see a white Peterbilt in your lane? Westbound? Pause. Negative. 2 lanes clear. What are you seeing? Nothing. Never mind. Thank you, long step. I pulled over at the next available turnout. Just sat there. 12:31 a.m. The voice had said 12:31 a.m. It was 11:51 p.m. I had 40 minutes. I went through my mental checklist. Hours driven today, 7. Last time I ate, a sandwich at 9 p.m. before I left. Sleep the previous night, 6 hours. I was tired. Every trucker is tired, but not dangerous tired. I knew the difference. I'd been in the dangerous zone before and I knew what it felt like. The way your blinks get long, the way the edge of your vision starts to blur, the way the road starts to breathe. I wasn't there. Not yet. But the voice had said 12:31. I sat in that turnout for 20 minutes. I drank the rest of my gas station coffee, cold and terrible. I called Connie. She didn't pick up. It was almost midnight, she was asleep. I left a voicemail. I told her I loved her. I told her I was taking a break and I'd be late getting to Amarillo. I tried to make my voice sound normal. I don't think it did. At 12:10 a.m., I pulled back onto the highway. I know how that sounds, but I want to be honest with you about why I did it. The recorder was still running, and I had a thought, irrational, maybe suicidal in retrospect, that if the voice was right, if this was already recorded somewhere, already decided, then nothing I did would change it. And if it was wrong, I needed to know that too. I needed to know the thing could be beaten. I drove at 55 miles per hour. Windows cracked. Radio on, actual music, not the CB. Both hands on the wheel. I watched the mile markers count up. 197, 198, 199, 12:29 a.m., 200, 12:30 a.m. I saw the other truck's headlights in the westbound lane. A standard sighting, just traffic. No swerve. No drift. 12:31 a.m. Mile marker 201. I held my breath. I passed it at 55 miles per hour, hands rigid on the wheel, and nothing happened. Nothing. 12:32. 12:33. I exhaled so hard the windshield fogged. I was still alive. Still on the road. Mile marker 202, 203, 204. The same spot where the overturned Kenworth had been, now just ordinary asphalt, and I was still moving, still breathing, still here. The voice was wrong. I want to stop the story there. I want to tell you that's the end, that I proved the transmissions were anomalies, coincidences, atmospheric garbage, and I drove to Amarillo and picked up my load and drove home to Connie and never thought about it again. But that's not what happened. Because at 12:44 a.m., the CB clicked on. And I heard my own voice. I want to be very careful here because this is the part where I lose people. This is the part where they stop believing me, where the look on their face shifts from sympathetic concern to something else. I've watched it happen in real time with the 3 people I've told this story to in person. So I'm going to be as precise as I can. I'm going to tell you exactly what I heard. My voice, the voice that lives in my own head when I speak, the one that sounds wrong in recordings but is undeniably mine, came out of my CB radio at 12:44 a.m. on a Wednesday night on I-40 somewhere east of Santa Rosa, New Mexico. It said, break, any driver, this is Midnight Runner eastbound on I-40, I need a welfare check. Is anyone near mile marker 201? I have a report of a possible hazard. Word for word. My transmission from 53 minutes earlier. 53 minutes earlier. Then it said, do you see a white Peterbilt in your lane? Westbound? And then, a few seconds later. Nothing. Never mind. Thank you, long step. And then the static. I was driving at 55 miles per hour and I somehow didn't crash the truck, which I count as a miracle of muscle memory because my conscious mind had completely left the building. The recorder got it. All of it. I checked it when I pulled over at a rest stop near the Texas state line at 1:15 a.m. I played back the recording. Everything was there, the original transmissions, my keyed responses, the voice describing my death, and then at 12:44 a.m., clear as anything, my own voice coming back through the CB to replay the conversation I'd had 53 minutes before. I sat in that rest stop for 2 hours. I called Marcus, my radio engineer brother-in-law, at 3 a.m. He answered, groggy, and I said, I need you to listen to something. He listened. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Dale, where are you? Texas state line. You need to stop driving. Right now. Check into a motel. What is it? What's on the recording? Another silence. And then Marcus said something that I've turned over in my mind every single day since. I don't know what that is. I know what it isn't. It isn't a delayed transmission. It isn't an echo. The signal-to-noise ratio is wrong for either of those explanations. What's on that recording shouldn't be physically possible with your equipment. I asked him what he meant. He said, your CB radio is a receiver and a transmitter. It can receive signals from other sources and it can transmit your own. But what's on this recording is your signal, your transmission, your specific RF signature, coming back into your radio. As if something received your broadcast and is now transmitting it back to you. Like an answer. Like, he stopped. Like what? I said. Like a mirror, he said. Like something is holding up a mirror to whatever's already happened out there on that road. I've had 7 months now to live with this. 7 months of not taking the I-40 run, of driving shorter routes during daylight, of waking up at 3 a.m. reaching for Connie's hand in the dark. The CB radio is still in my truck. I haven't taken it out. I've thought about it. But taking it out feels like the wrong move, like covering a smoke detector when there's something you haven't found yet in the walls. I have a theory. I want to be clear that it's just a theory. I'm a truck driver, not a physicist or a paranormal investigator or whatever you'd call the kind of person who is qualified to have an opinion on this. I think I-40, in that stretch between Albuquerque and Amarillo, is doing something to radio signals. Not in a scientific, explainable way. In a different way. In the way that very old places sometimes hold things. That highway runs along what used to be Route 66. Before that, it was a wagon road. Before that, it was a trail. People have been dying on that stretch of ground for a very long time. Accidents, wagon train disasters, violence, exposure, thirst. The land out there is old and it is not gentle and it does not give things back easily. I think that somewhere in that corridor, in the dark between the mile markers, something is recording. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. The way a stone wall sometimes holds the cold of winter even on the first warm day of spring. The way a room can feel wrong even after everything inside it has been replaced. I think the road is playing back what it has absorbed. Every voice that was broadcast across it, every emergency call, every last transmission from every driver who found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong moment. I think it plays them back on a loop, at roughly the speed of the original event, as if it hasn't understood yet that the event is over. As if it's still waiting for something. The night the voice described my death, I didn't die. But that transmission exists now. It's out there. My voice, my handle, my CB signature, describing a head-on collision at mile marker 201 that didn't happen. 53 minutes later, it played it back to me. Which means it absorbed my transmission. Which means it has my voice now. Which means that somewhere out there tonight, on channel 19 in the dark between mile markers 89 and 204 on I-40, a voice is broadcasting. My voice. Telling a story about a trucker named Dale Mercer. Describing a road. Describing a night. And some driver, somewhere, is keying up their mic and asking if anyone has eyes on a white Peterbilt near mile marker 201. And the road is listening. And it will play that back too. I try not to think about how many voices it's collected over the years. I try not to think about how long it's been running. I try not to think about Raymond Castillo, who is alive, and what transmission exists in that corridor describing the death he didn't die. I try not to think about whether he'll hear it one day, his own name coming out of a radio, telling him something that almost was. I've submitted the recording to 3 different radio engineering firms. 2 of them sent it back with form letters. The third one, a firm out of Austin, sent a real response. A single paragraph from a senior engineer. It said, and I'm going to read this exactly, "The recording you submitted contains multiple transmissions consistent with CB band frequencies. We can verify the technical authenticity of the audio. We cannot offer an explanation for the source of the transmissions marked as anomalous. We recommend consulting a different type of specialist." They didn't specify what kind. Connie wants me to stop driving. I've been thinking about it. 19 years is a long time. The knees aren't what they were. There are other things I could do. Last week I was driving a short local run, completely different highway, no connection to I-40, just a state route up into the Sandia Mountains, and my CB crackled. I reached for the power switch. I stopped. Because the voice that came through wasn't the voice. It was just a trucker. A young guy from the sound of it, running something through T. Harris Canyon, complaining about the grade. Ordinary. Human. Alive. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and I drove the rest of the route in silence. But last night I was going over my notes again, the ones I made during those 11 days, and I found something I'd written and then forgotten about. A detail from the third transmission. The one about Raymond Castillo. At the very end of the transmission, after it described what was going to happen to him, there was a line I had written down but hadn't thought much about at the time. My notes say it came through at the tail end, almost swallowed by the returning static. The voice said, "Approaching driver will intervene. His name is Dale Mercer. He is listening." I read that note 3 times. The voice knew I was listening. It knew I would stop. It described my intervention as part of the event, not as an anomaly, not as a variable, but as something that was already part of the record. Which means that when the road played back that transmission to the next driver who passed through that stretch, whenever that was, whatever night, whatever trucker had their CB on channel 19 at the right moment, they heard about Raymond Castillo and they heard my name. They heard that I was listening. Maybe they looked for me. Maybe they keyed up and asked if Midnight Runner was on frequency. Maybe they heard nothing back and drove on, shaking it off. Or maybe, and this is the thing I can't stop sitting with, maybe they heard me respond. Maybe the road played my response too. And their question. And their silence after. And now that whole conversation is in there. All of it. Every voice that touched that frequency in that corridor, layered on top of each other, playing and replaying, an endless record that the road makes of everything that passes through it. Every accident. Every close call. Every last transmission from someone who didn't make it home. And somewhere in that loop, clear as anything, the voice of a trucker named Dale Mercer saying, "Brake, brake. Is anyone out there? I need a welfare check. I have a report of a possible hazard." And the road listening. And the road answering. And the loop continuing. Miles and miles and miles. Into the dark. There are places the road takes you that were never meant to be found. I know that now. I know it the way a man knows a scar, not by looking at it but by the ache that comes when the weather changes. 3 weeks ago, I stopped at a truck stop somewhere in Nevada. The coffee was bad, the lighting was wrong, and the man behind the counter smiled at me like he had been waiting, not for me specifically but for anyone, for the next warm body to walk through that door and forget to leave. I still don't know how long I was inside. I don't know if I ever really came out. What I do know is that when I drove away, when I finally desperately drove away, I saw my own headlights coming toward me from the opposite direction. My truck, my plates, my face behind the wheel. And that version of me didn't look afraid at all. He looked like he'd already accepted it. Like he'd been there for years. Let me tell you how it started. You want to understand what happened, you have to understand what it feels like to drive at night in Nevada. Not the Vegas stretch. Forget the strip, forget the neon and the noise. I'm talking about the real Nevada. The Nevada that exists between cities, between civilization, between the places people bother to name. It's nothing. I mean that literally. It is as close to nothing as anything can be while still technically existing. The highway cuts through the dark like a slit in black paper, and on either side of you there is just absence. Flat, ancient, absolute. The stars out there are so thick and so bright it feels wrong, like a stage set, like someone put too many of them on purpose to make you feel small. And it works. God help me, it works every time. My name is Dale Pruitt. I've been driving long haul for 11 years. Refrigerated freight, mostly. Pharmaceuticals, sometimes. The kind of cargo that doesn't care what time it is and doesn't wait for you to feel rested. You drive when the manifest says to drive, and you stop when the hours of service log says you have to, and somewhere in between you learn to hate the road and love it at the same time. That Tuesday night, I think it was Tuesday, I've had a hard time being certain about the day ever since. I was running a load from Salt Lake City to Reno. Standard haul. 7 hours on a good run, maybe 8.5 if I hit construction or a slow way station. I'd done it a dozen times. I knew the road. I knew the exits, the rest areas, the little border towns where the gas stations close at 9 and the motels have names like Desert Rose and Starlight and Traveler's Friend. I was about 4 hours out of Salt Lake when it started. The tiredness. Not regular tiredness. I know regular tiredness, I've made peace with regular tiredness the way you make peace with an old injury that never fully healed. This was different. This was the kind of tired that gets behind your eyes and pushes. The kind that makes the center line do things it isn't supposed to do. The kind that, in this line of work, gets people killed. I slapped myself twice on the cheek. Hard. Turned the radio up until the country station from Elko was so loud the door panels buzzed. Cracked the window and let the cold desert air hit me in the face like a slap from something ancient and indifferent. It helped for maybe 10 minutes. Then the tired came back, deeper than before, like it had been biding its time. My GPS showed nothing. That's the thing people don't understand about this stretch of 80. There are sections, genuine sections, where the nearest fuel is 40 miles out and the nearest town is a word on a sign and nothing else. I'd passed the last pilot station 20 minutes back. Hadn't stopped because I was making good time and the tank was at a third. Rookie mistake. Veteran mistake, which is worse. I checked the GPS again. A little blue triangle representing me, crawling across a gray nothing. No exits flagged. No services. Just highway, and the highway's ending somewhere I couldn't see yet. That's when I saw the light. Not headlights, there was nothing coming the other way, hadn't been anything in over an hour. Not the lights of a town. Something lower, warmer. The particular amber glow of a parking lot at night, the kind that pools beneath canopy lights and spills out onto the asphalt in soft, diesel-scented halos. I blinked, leaned forward. There was an exit ramp I didn't remember from any of my previous runs. Just a single green sign, the reflective letters catching my beams. Services, 1 mile. I almost didn't take it. 11 years of driving had made me particular about the stops I chose. I had my places, my routines. Unknown exits in the middle of nowhere Nevada at 2 in the morning did not fit into my system. But the tired was behind my eyes and in my hands, and I was starting to feel the front of the truck drift, just slightly, just a few inches toward the rumble strip. And a few inches at 70 miles an hour is the difference between a man who drives home and a man they find in the morning. I took the exit. The ramp curved in a way that felt too long. I want you to understand that I've driven thousands of exit ramps and they have a standard geometry, a standard rhythm, the way a piece of music has a standard tempo. You know by feel when the curve should end and the access road should begin. This one kept going. Kept bending to the right, slightly, incrementally, until I wasn't sure anymore which direction the highway was. Then I came around one more curve and there it was. A truck stop. A real one, or something that looked like one. Canopy lights over a fuel island, a low building with big plate glass windows, a parking lot with maybe 8 or 10 semis already nosed in. A sign above the building big enough to read from the road, Continental Fuels. Open 24 hours. I exhaled. Felt my shoulders drop 2 inches. The body is a simple machine sometimes. It sees something familiar and it relaxes before the mind has even finished evaluating the situation. I pulled up to the fuel island and killed the engine. Sat for a moment in the sudden silence, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Looked at the building. Somebody was moving behind the glass. I could see a shape, humanoid, slow. The way people move when it's the dead of night and they're working a job that hasn't surprised them in years. Normal, I told myself. Perfectly normal. I climbed down from the cab. And that's when I noticed the first thing. The quiet. Not just the absence of traffic noise, that was expected. We were a mile from a nearly empty highway. I mean a deeper quiet. An architectural quiet. Like the air itself had been treated, muffled, like the sound was being absorbed before it could travel very far. I clapped my hands once, sharp, the way you do when you're testing a room's acoustics. The sound came out flat. Dead. Like clapping in a closet. I stood at the fuel island and looked around. The parking lot was lit by those amber canopy lights I'd seen from the highway. But up close the light was wrong. It had a quality I couldn't name at first. Too even, maybe? No gradients. No shadows pooling in the corners the way shadows should when a light source is overhead and directional. Everything was just equally lit. Flat. Like a photograph of a parking lot rather than a parking lot itself. I rubbed my eyes. Long night, I told myself. Tired brain. I looked at the other trucks, 8 of them, nosed in along the side of the building the way truckers do, engines off, dark. Sleeping drivers, I assumed. Normal. Perfectly normal. I swiped my fuel card at the pump. The screen blinked on, asked for my PIN. I entered it. A pause, longer than usual, long enough that I started to think the connection had failed, and then it came back. Approved. Begin fueling. I grabbed the nozzle. Started filling. Watched the numbers on the pump roll up. And then I noticed the second thing. The numbers weren't rolling the way they should. Gallons are gallons, they flow at a standard rate, and the numbers on a fuel pump move at a corresponding speed. I've watched enough of them to know the rhythm. These numbers were moving too slowly. Much too slowly. Like the pump was delivering fuel at a quarter of the normal flow rate. But when I looked down at the nozzle, the flow seemed normal. The diesel was going in just fine. I stood there and watched the counter and felt, for the first time, the particular flavor of unease that I would come to know very well over the next few hours. Not fear, not yet. Something quieter. The feeling of a thing being slightly off in a way that doesn't have a name and resists explanation. When the tank was full, and it took much longer than it should have, I replaced the nozzle and decided to go inside. The door was one of those heavy glass doors with a metal push bar, the kind that every truck stop and gas station in America has, identical from Texas to Oregon. I pushed it open. The bell above the door didn't chime. I noticed that. I noticed it the way you notice when someone stops a conversation mid-sentence. Not a dramatic absence, just a wrong silence where a sound was expected. The inside was arranged the way these places are always arranged. Long aisles of snacks and travel supplies. A row of hot food warmers along the back wall, the glass fogged with trapped heat. A coffee station with those big silver urns and the little plastic cups and the powdered creamer that never dissolves properly. Coolers along the right wall humming. A counter near the door with a register and a lottery ticket display. And behind the counter, a man. He was maybe 50, maybe 60. Hard to say. He had the kind of face that resists aging. Not because it looked young, but because it looked fixed, settled into itself so completely that time had stopped having opinions about it. Gray hair neatly combed. A blue polo shirt with the Continental Fuels logo on the breast pocket. He was standing behind the counter with his hands flat on the surface, and he was looking at me. And he was smiling. Not a customer service smile. Not the reflexive, exhausted smile of someone who's been told to greet everyone who walks through the door. Something different. Something that had too much intention behind it. Like the smile was the end result of a calculation rather than an emotion. "Welcome in," he said. His voice was perfectly normal. The words were perfectly normal. And yet the combination of them, in that room, with that smile, produced in me a sensation that I can only describe as the feeling you get when you're watching a movie and you realize the score has stopped. That particular, electric absence that tells you something is about to happen. "Thanks," I said. "Just gonna grab some coffee and maybe a sandwich if you've got one." "We've got plenty," he said. And the smile didn't move. Not a millimeter. I walked to the coffee station. Grabbed a large cup. The urn nearest me had a paper sign taped to it. "Fresh. Made at 11. I poured. The coffee came out black and thin-looking the way bad diner coffee does. I added 2 of the little creamers, watched them swirl, and made myself take a sip. It tasted like nothing. Not bad nothing, not the particular bitterness of old burned coffee. Just nothing. Like warm brown water. Like a photograph of coffee. I was standing there with my cup, deciding whether to mention this to the man at the counter when I saw the other people. There were 3 of them, seated at the little cafe tables near the window. 2 men, 1 woman, all in the jeans and flannel and caps of working people. Truckers, I assumed, from the big rigs parked outside. They were seated with food and drinks in front of them, and they were not eating, not talking, just sitting, looking at the table or out the window or at the wall, moving very slightly. breathing, alive. But slowly, all of them slowly. Their chests rose and fell on a long labored cycle. When one of the men lifted his coffee cup, his arm moved with a deliberateness that was painful to watch, like he was moving underwater, like every cubic centimeter of air in that room had the consistency of something thicker than air. I watched him bring the cup to his lips. He didn't blink. Not once in the entire time I watched him, maybe 20 seconds, did any of these three people blink. I looked back at the man behind the counter. He was still smiling, still watching me. Long night, I said, nodding toward the seated people, trying to make it casual. They've been here a while, he said. And there was something in the way he said it, a weight on the word while, that made the back of my neck go cold. I got a shrink-wrap sandwich from the rack. Turkey and Swiss, manufactured somewhere weeks ago, the kind of thing you eat when eating is purely mechanical and taste is irrelevant. Brought it to the counter. The man scanned it without looking at it. His eyes stayed on me. $4.80, he said. I handed him a $5. He opened the register. The drawer came out slowly in that mechanical, hydraulic way of things that are old and well used. He counted out 20 cents change, placed it on the counter in front of me, coin by coin, deliberately, like he was teaching someone how change worked. I looked down at the coins, then back up at him, and I saw that his eyes, in the light, in that wrong, flat, even light, had no depth. You know how you can look into a person's eyes and you feel, even across a distance, that there is something behind them? Something thinking, something working, something more than just biology? His eyes had the surface quality of eyes without whatever is usually behind them. I pocketed the change, picked up my coffee and my sandwich, told myself I was tired and reading things wrong, told myself I just needed to sit down for 20 minutes, eat, and then get back on the road. I chose a table far from the other three, near the window. I could see my truck from here, the dark shape of it, the running lights I'd left on, the familiar outline of 11 years of work and life and somewhere in between. I unwrapped the sandwich, took a bite. It tasted like nothing. There was a clock on the wall. One of those big round institutional clocks with a white face and black numbers and a red second hand. The kind that every school and diner and government building in America has had since 1960. The kind you could set your life by. The second hand was moving. I watched it for a full minute, counted the seconds under my breath the way you do when you're checking a clock's accuracy. 1, 2, 3. At around 45, the second hand slowed. Not stopped, slowed. Dragging through the last quarter of the clock face like it was moving through something resistant. Then it reached 12 and began again at normal speed and then slowed again and reached 12, and I checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. I looked at the wall clock. 2:17. I ate my flavorless sandwich, drank my flavorless coffee, told myself I would leave in 15 minutes. I checked my phone again. 2:17 a.m. The phone said 2:17. The wall clock said 2:17. I had been sitting there. I was certain of this, certain in the specific way you are certain of time when you are very tired and very focused on not falling asleep, for at least 10 minutes, maybe more. And it was still 2:17. I stood up, walked to the counter. Is that clock right? I asked the man, pointed at it. He looked at the clock, then back at me. It's right, he said. The smile. It's been 2:17 for a while, I said. Has it? He said. And the way he said it, the particular weightless way he said has it, like the question contained no genuine inquiry but only the shape of one, was when I first felt actual fear. Not unease. Not the prickling of something being off. Fear. The cold, specific, biological kind that lives below thought. I need to get back on the road, I said. Sure, he said. Drive safe. I went to the door, pushed it open, no bell just as before. Walked to my truck, climbed up, settled into the seat. The familiar smell of my cab, stale coffee, air freshener, the particular synthetic smell of the sleeping bunk's foam, never felt so good. I started the engine, put it in reverse, backed away from the building, watched the truck stop recede in my mirrors, let out a breath. I pulled toward the exit. The ramp curved to the right, then right again, the same too long geometry as coming in, and I followed it, followed the white lines, followed the logic of a road that said there was a way out, and then, the building was in front of me. Continental Fuels. The canopy lights. The amber glow. The plate glass windows. The shape of a man behind them standing at the counter. I had driven in a full circle without turning. I sat in my truck for a long time before I went back inside, trying different things. I tried driving slowly, paying attention to every degree of steering input, making sure I was going straight. The ramp curved away from me. I drove it straight. It curved. I tried going faster. I tried going slower. I tried stopping halfway up the ramp and sitting in the idling truck in the dark of that curved concrete channel, with my high beams on and nothing ahead of me but the ramp's long bend, and thought very carefully about what I knew to be true. I was not dreaming. I know what dreaming feels like. I've had enough highway microsleeps to recognize the texture of that particular unreality. The unnatural smoothness of it, the way things connect without the friction of cause and effect. This had friction. This had weight and smell and the pain of the seatbelt digging into my hip where I'd been sitting wrong. This was real. Something real was happening, and it was happening in a way I didn't have a language for. I checked my GPS. No signal. Not weak signal, no signal. The little triangle that represented me had vanished from the map entirely. I was, according to my GPS, nowhere. I called my dispatcher. The phone rang once and then played a silence that was not quite static. More like the sound of nothing, of genuine electromagnetic absence. I went back inside. The three people at the tables hadn't moved. Same positions, same slow breathing, same unblinking eyes on the same mid-distances. The woman's coffee cup, still in front of her, still apparently full, had a thin skin on the surface now, the way coffee skins when it's been sitting for a long time and gone cold. Can't get back to the highway, I told the man behind the counter. I was keeping my voice flat, controlled. I've dealt with difficult situations on the road, jackknife it in ice, brake failure on a mountain grade, a medical emergency in the middle of Wyoming with no cell signal. I know how to keep my voice flat. He said. The smile. The exit ramp keeps bringing me back here. It does that, he said, like he was agreeing that the weather was bad. I looked at him for a long moment. Has this happened before? To other people? He looked at the three people at the tables. Back at me. They're still figuring it out, he said. I walked over to the nearest of the three. A heavy-set man in his 50s with a Peterbilt cap and a beard that looked like it had grown considerably past where a man typically stops growing a beard. Unkempt, wild, weeks worth, maybe more. I pulled up a chair and sat across from him. Hey, I said. I'm Dale. I just stopped for fuel. He looked at me. His eyes found my face with the deliberate targeting of something that had to think about looking. His smile came after a noticeable delay, a beat too long like a video call with a bad connection. Gary, he said. His voice was like the coffee. The texture of a voice without what voices are supposed to have in them. Gary, do you know how to get out of here? He considered this for a long time. His chest rose and fell once, slowly, and when he answered it was with the careful pacing of someone who has thought deeply about every word before releasing it. I was going to figure that out, he said, after I finished my coffee. I looked at his coffee. The skin on the surface was thick. The cup was cold, I could tell by looking. He had not touched it in a very long time. Gary, how long have you been here? He looked at the window. At the dark outside. At the amber parking lot glow that went on and didn't change. I stopped for a break, he said. I was tired. When? What day did you stop? He looked at me with something that might have been confusion or might have been the memory of confusion, the ghost of it. I was going to Fresno, he said. I had a load for Fresno. Gary, what's today's date? A long pause. His eyes went somewhere that was not the room. Then, I was going to leave after my coffee. I stood up and checked the woman. Same thing, name offered Carol, city of destination offered Phoenix, no awareness of time, no awareness of how long she'd been sitting. The second man didn't speak at all. He just watched me with those surface eyes and breathed his long, slow breath. I went back to the counter. Who are you? I asked the man. I work here, he said. What is this place? Continental Fuels. Open 24 hours. This place isn't on any map. The exit ramp circles back. The clocks don't move. Those people have been here. I stopped. How long have they been here? He looked at the people at the tables with an expression I can only describe as fond. The way a zookeeper looks at animals. The way a man who has done his job for a very long time looks at the thing his job consists of. They came in when they were tired, he said. Like you. I went through all of the things a person goes through when reality stops cooperating. Denial, I went through that on the exit ramp the first 3 times it curved me back. Bargaining, I tried that at the counter, tried to reason with the man who worked there, tried to find the logical framework that would make this make sense. Anger, I felt that when I stood in the parking lot and slammed my fist on the hood of my truck hard enough to hurt my hand, which at least told me I still had pain response, still had body, still had something. Then I tried something else. I tried looking. Really looking. The way you look when you're trying to understand something rather than trying to escape from it. I walked the perimeter of the property. It was not large. The building, the fuel island, the parking lot, the strip of decorative gravel along the edges that every truck stop has. I walked along the gravel, past the end of the building, past the dumpster enclosure with its chain link fence, past the utility boxes and the LP tanks and the back wall of the structure. The back wall had a door. A plain metal door with a push bar. I pushed it. It opened into the front of the building. The coffee station was directly in front of me. The man was at the counter. He raised a hand in greeting. The building had no back. Or rather, the building's back connected to its front. It folded. I stood in the doorway for a very long time, holding the door open with one hand, looking at the man in the coffee station and the three people at their tables. Then I let the door close and stood in the parking lot and breathed the cold desert air that wasn't quite right. Too still, too constant, the same temperature it had been every time I'd been outside, no variation, no wind, and I thought about Gary and his beard. About how long a beard would have to grow to look like Gary's beard. Weeks certainly, possibly months. I thought about Carol's coffee, skinned over in the cup like it had been sitting for days. I thought about the man at the counter and his smile that never moved and his eyes that had the surface of eyes without the depth of them. And I thought about something else. Something I'd been avoiding thinking about, the way you avoid looking directly at a very bright light. My hands. I looked at my hands. In the amber light of the parking lot. And I noticed, for the first time, the way you sometimes don't notice the most obvious thing until you're forced to, that my hands were dirty. Not road dirty, not the standard grime of a long drive. Dirty in the way of someone who has been working with them. My knuckles were rough. There was a callus on my right palm that I didn't remember having. I checked my face in the side mirror of my truck. Ran my hand along my jaw. Stubble. Real stubble. Not the 8-hour shadow of a man who shaved that morning. More than that. A week's worth maybe. Maybe more. I had shaved before I left Salt Lake. I knew I had. I could remember the sink, the foam, the particular drag of the razor on the right side of my jaw where there's an old scar and the skin goes uneven. I stood at the mirror and felt the math resolve itself in a way that made my stomach drop. Gary with his months of beard. Carol with her long cold coffee. The second man with his silence. And me with my week-old stubble and my hands that were wrong and my certainty, slowly unraveling, that I had only just arrived. 2:17 a.m. 2:17 forever. How long had I been here before I woke up enough to notice? I went back inside. There was nowhere else to go. I sat at the counter this time, pulled up one of the spinning stools and sat across from the man and put my hands flat on the laminate surface and said, "I want you to tell me the truth." He looked at me with his fixed smile. Waited. Am I stuck here? Like them? Pause. The second hand on the wall clock dragged through its slow quarter. Then, you stopped because you were tired. Yes. The road brings you here when you're tired. What does that mean? I said. I kept my voice flat. I was very proud of that. It means exactly that, he said. The road. When people are very tired. It brings them here. And then what? They just stay. He looked at Gary. At Carol. At the silent man. Back at me. They rested, he said. And again that weight on the word. Rested. Past tense and permanent. I don't want to rest. I want to leave. Most of them said that, he said. At first. I looked at Gary. Gary was looking at his coffee cup. Moving his hand toward it, very slowly. His face had the expression of someone doing something they've done so many times it no longer requires thought. Just the body going through its motions because the body doesn't know what else to do. Are there others? I said. More than these three? He looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached under the counter and put something on the surface in front of me. A stack of driver's licenses. Laminated rectangles, state IDs and CDL licenses, the kind of cards that fit in a wallet and contain a person's name and address and the official record of what they look like. I counted them without picking them up. There were more than 30. I looked at the top one. A man named Robert Kessler from Akron, Ohio. His face in the photo was the face of a living man, the particular aliveness of someone who exists in the world, who has places to be, who did not expect to spend forever in a truck stop in Nevada. Where are they? I said. My voice was no longer quite flat. He looked at the building around us, at the ceiling, at the walls, at the coffee station and the snack aisles and the restroom door at the back. Here, he said. They're all still here. I looked around the empty store, at the 2 even light and the 2 still air and the 3 visible people and the 30 invisible ones. What happens to them? I said. What happens eventually? They're very tired, he said. They needed to rest. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. he said. And for just a moment, just a fraction of a moment, the smile changed. Something passed behind it that I did not want to look at directly. I picked up the stack of licenses, shuffled through them. Robert Kessler, Ohio. Maria Dominguez, Arizona. Frank Tibbs, Tennessee. Walter Oakes, Texas. Name after name after name, faces staring up at me from plastic windows, all of them caught in the specific moment of a DMV photo. Slightly uncertain, slightly too aware of the camera, slightly not themselves. And then I got to the bottom of the stack and my hand stopped. The last license was mine. Dale Pruitt, Utah. My address on Harmon Street. My CDL Class A. My face. The face I'd seen in the mirror every day for 43 years, the face that was looking back at me from the photo with that particular DMV uncertainty. My license. In the stack. With the others. I set it down. Very carefully. Like it might do something. I reached for my wallet. Unfolded it. The slot where my license lived was empty. I looked at the man. The man looked at me. The smile. I'm already in the stack, I said. You've been here a while, he said. You just woke up a bit tonight. How long? He reached under the counter again. Put something else in front of me. A newspaper. The Salt Lake Tribune. I looked at the date. And I understand now why Gary couldn't answer me when I asked him what day it was. Because the number doesn't make sense when you look at it. Your mind rejects it the way a body rejects a foreign thing. I looked at the date on that newspaper and I looked at it again and I calculated the distance between that date and the Tuesday night I had pulled off the highway, and the number that came back was not a number I could hold in my head without it becoming something else. No, I said. Afraid so, he said. I stood up. The stool spun behind me. I walked to the door and pushed through it and stood in the parking lot and breathed the constant temperature air and looked at my truck and tried to find the edge of something I could hold onto. I was standing at the far end of the parking lot, past the row of dark semis, looking out at where the exit ramp disappeared around its bend, trying to decide what to try next, whether to try anything at all. I was thinking about my wife, Linda. About the last time I talked to her, the night before I left Salt Lake, she'd complained that the front porch light was out and she'd asked me to replace it when I got back. I was thinking about that porch light, about what it meant that someone was going to ask her where I was, and she was going to start making calls, and the calls were going to come back without answers. About the particular specific weight of being a missing person, which is not the same as being dead. It's worse in some ways because it leaves a different kind of hole. I was thinking about all of that when I saw the light at the top of the ramp. Headlights. Coming down. I felt a flare of something, hope, maybe, or at least its biological precursor, the thing that lives in the body before the mind catches up. Someone else. Someone new. If they could get in, maybe there was a way to get out. The headlights came down the ramp. High, wide-set headlights. A truck's headlights. They swept the parking lot as the vehicle turned, and the light caught the sides of the parked semis, and I stood very still and watched. The truck came into the parking lot. And stopped. I looked at it. The light from the canopy caught it fully. A Kenworth T680, midnight blue, the left front mud flap slightly bent where it had caught something on a loading dock, the running lights amber white in the standard pattern. My truck. My exact truck. Not one like mine. Mine. I knew this truck. I knew the specific bend in that mud flap, a dock in Ogden 3 years ago. I knew the small dent in the passenger side step that you could only see at a certain angle. I knew the way the trailer hitch sat slightly left of center because the fifth wheel plate had been shimmed incorrectly at a shop in Phoenix and I'd never gotten around to having it corrected. My truck had driven into the parking lot of a place I was trapped in. While I was standing in that parking lot, watching, the cab door opened. The dome light inside came on for a moment, yellow, warm, familiar, and a figure climbed down from the cab. He was wearing my jacket. The green canvas Carhartt with the tear in the left shoulder pocket from when I'd caught it on a fence hook in Kansas. He was wearing my boots. He moved the way I moved. I recognized my own gait the way you recognize your own voice on a recording, with a kind of appalled disbelief. He walked toward the building, toward the door. He moved like a man who was tired, who had been driving too long, who needed coffee and 20 minutes off the road. He moved like a man who had not yet realized what he'd pulled into. He reached the door, pushed it open. The Nobel silence. Before he went inside, he paused. Just for a moment. The way you pause sometimes when you're entering an unfamiliar place, that split second of animal assessment. And in that pause, he turned his head and looked directly at me. My face. My eyes. 43 years and 11 years of driving and every morning of my life reflected back at me across 40 feet of amber parking lot. He looked at me with the specific expression of a man who is very tired and has just seen something that doesn't make sense and has decided, for the sake of forward motion, to process it later. Then he went inside. I'm writing this down because I found a pen behind the counter and a stack of paper receipts, and I'm filling up the backs of them, one by one, in the careful handwriting of a man who needs to say something and has no one to say it to. I don't know what will happen to me next. I've watched myself, the other me, the fresh one, go through everything I went through. The coffee, the sandwich, the clock, the exit ramp. He's a quick learner. He got to the license stack faster than I did. He's sitting at the counter right now, looking at his own license in the stack, and I can see his face doing the same thing mine did. That particular calculation, that specific rejection, that moment where the number doesn't fit and the mind tries to throw it back. I don't know what I am anymore. I'm not Gary, not yet. I still have something that feels like urgency, still have some thread connecting me to the world I came from. But Gary must have had it once. Carol must have had it. All 30-something of those names in the license stack must have stood where I'm standing at some point, with their own fresh self walking through the door, and felt what I'm feeling. The man at the counter watches me right. He hasn't stopped smiling. I've given up trying to understand what he is, whether he's something the road made or something the road found, or something that was always here waiting for the road to arrive around it. What I keep coming back to is the porch light. Linda and the porch light on Harmon Street. By now, someone has noticed I'm missing. By now, the company has filed something and the police have taken a report, and Linda has called everyone she can think of and nobody has told her anything useful because there's nothing useful to tell. By now, she's sitting in the house with the broken porch light and waiting for a phone to ring. I wonder if the other me, the fresh one, the one who just found his license in the stack, I wonder if he's thinking about Linda too. I wonder if he's further along than I was, if he's already made peace with something I'm still fighting. I wonder how many versions of me are in this room. Whether Gary remembers being where I am. Whether he had his own moment of watching himself walk in from the parking lot. The clock says 2:17. It will always say 2:17. Someone else is going to get tired somewhere on the highway tonight. Maybe in Nevada. Maybe somewhere else. I don't think the road cares about geography the way we do. They're going to see the glow of this place from the highway and think, good, a stop. They're going to pull off the exit that curves too long. They're going to come into the too even light and smell the coffee that has no smell and look at the man with the fixed smile and feel that first tremor of wrongness and decide it was just the hour, just the exhaustion, just the brain doing strange things when you push it past its limit. And then they're going to see one of us. They're going to see me, maybe, at a table, not moving much, not blinking the way I should, my beard a little too long and my coffee a little too cold. And they're going to pull up a chair and introduce themselves. And I'm going to tell them my name and the city I was heading to when I stopped. And I'm going to look like a man who has been here a while but is just about to figure out how to leave. I know that now. I know how this works. The road brings you here when you're tired. And then you rest. For as long as the road needs you to. My handwriting is already getting slower. I can feel it. The pen moving with more effort, each letter requiring a decision that used to be automatic. The fresh me, the other Dale, has stopped talking. He's at a table now. He found a pen of his own. I want to go over there. I want to tell him, fight it. Keep moving. Don't let the slow come for you. Don't let the 2:17 settle into your bones. But I've been here long enough to understand what Gary understood, what all of them understood at some point. There's nothing to fight. The place is patient. It has forever and you don't. Outside, through the plate glass, I can see the parking lot. The same light, the same amber, the same trucks nosed in. My truck, both of my trucks, sitting side by side in the lot. And at the top of the exit ramp, just barely visible beyond the long bend. Headlights. Someone else is pulling in. The man behind the counter straightens up, adjusts his smile, and waits. If you're driving tonight, if you're out there on any highway in any state and you're tired, and you see a light in the distance that isn't on your GPS, keep driving. Whatever it costs you to keep driving, it costs you less than the alternative. The road will give you what you need. But some places on the road will take more than you meant to give. And not all stops have exits.